I'm Anita Asante, a former Lioness. I recently retired last summer, playing in the WSL, played for a number of clubs in obviously the UK, but also in USA and Sweden. And in my transition, became a first team coach for Bristol City women.
Awesome. And your career in football, underplayed it a lot there, but I did manage to find some stats. 71 caps for England, first women's team outside of Germany or Scandinavia to win the UEFA Women's Cup. And then as a coach, then promotion, nigh on straight away, 100% so far, Neats, which is class. You've achieved so much. Can we hear a little bit about that? You know, starting from a youngster, you know, your dreams, your aspirations, to then achieving that number of caps, you know, which not many people get to do, you know, breaking records for the first team to achieve, winning competitions and those sorts of things. What is the atmosphere like to be part of a team like that? The feeling, the goals, do they change? I've chucked a lot of questions in there, but yeah, I just get a feel for feeling success.
No, we'll start from the beginning, I guess. I mean, I started playing with guys in my area when I was like 14, even younger than that, but they're, you know, older kids. And that was the first sense of playing in a sort of team environment. You know, the football courts in my area was my playground, was my training ground. And I picked up the sport and I just was really passionate about playing. But, you know, you hear lots of stories about people having major goals and aspirations to become, you know, the next Leo Messi or Ronaldo, whoever it is. And I can honestly say that wasn't necessarily my goal, because for me, the women's game was not visible. It was not across TV. It was not across, you know, print media. And I didn't sort of know that was a career path that I could necessarily go on to until much further along in my sort of football journey. But obviously, once I did get there into a club environment, it just, you know, the energy you feel from having other people around you that are just as passionate, who just love the game, is an incredible feeling to be part of something. And I felt like here I found my tribe, you know, that's really what it was. And I felt at home in that space. I felt like I belonged as well. And that was a really important, you know, place for me to get to, because it helped so many things within me, my self-esteem, my confidence, and all those things as well. Fundamentally, my main goal was to do well in education. That was where my push was from my family, my parents. And then when I got into football and I got into Arsenal, and I finally got to a club that I could see, wow, you know, look at this legacy, look at this history, and learn about the history of the women's game within the club. Suddenly I was like, oh my God, there have been so many pioneers before me in my place playing at this club, achieving all these goals. And then I got this sense of, I want to be part of that journey. I want to be part of the next generation of players that also continue that legacy. And then from then on, my goals got much bigger, because then it was not just playing domestically at Arsenal. It was, can I play for England at youth level? You know, then can I progress to the next phase of that and get into the senior team? And then it's, can I play in a European Championship? You know, can I play in a World Cup? So I think it's a long journey. It's not a short one. And every time your goals just get bigger and bigger and bigger, because you see the opportunities and the platform sort of ahead of you, if that makes sense. And then, you know, like I said, being surrounded by players, a lot of them who were more senior than me. I was 18 when I got into the senior team. These were women who had lived experience, you know, they were mothers, they were teachers, they had other occupations. And I felt like, wow, like we could do something really big together, you know, domestically. And that was exciting. I was at a point where I was kind of fearless, and, you know, that kind of idea that the world is your oyster really was that feeling, despite knowing the profile of the game really wasn't what it is sort of today.
Remember that first role model, female role model? Was there a first time where you sort of, because it's quite a click, isn't it? So it sounded like your drive was because it was boys and you were having, and then there's a separate drive which says, actually, now I'm I'm in a a league with other women and in Arsenal and so on. I just wondered was there somebody you could follow? Was there somebody you could see?
Yeah, I think for me, it's funny, around that time, everybody knew about Mia Hamm from the US national team. She was the superstar, but she was sort of like an enigma. You knew her name. Nike were releasing boots under her name, but I was like, I've never seen her play. I just know she's a World Cup superstar, but I've never seen her and, had the opportunity to watch her. But for some reason, that made you feel like there's this whole entity out there that you should be like clambering for, that you can't quite see or touch yet. And actually, my first role model was Rachel Yankee. She grew up in Northwest London near me. She took the very first tryout session that I had. She came with her little dreadlocks, and I thought, oh, this is so cool. Like someone who comes from a community similar to mine, similar background, and she was coaching me, and I just thought, wow, this is so cool. She plays for England. So then it was even more of a, I've got to get myself into Arsenal. I've got to be around players like that.
Is that goal away from performance in, making people realise that the profile of the women's game should be bigger and respected. Did that bring you together as a team? In terms of culture and belonging, is that something that motivated you and drove you, that you had a point to prove when you were younger, when you were playing against the boys? Was that your new point to prove, as a collective, for sort of, it sounds corny, but sort of a bigger purpose? Does that make sense?
Yeah, to be a visible role model for others, and, to drive the game forward in some other way rather than just performance on the pitch. I totally get that, but I don't think that really happened for myself or my teammates at that period of time, because our main objectives at that time was performance driven. In terms of, we had other pressures outside of just playing, because we only trained twice a week as a team, and then I had the pressure of trying to train to be an international level by myself, or with a select few players in my regional area, just to compete at that level. So, thinking about the wider picture and the long term and longevity of the game, I don't think is something that massively entered my consciousness at that point in my career. I think that's come a lot later, and it's largely because of the variety of platforms available to us now. The space to sort of utilize our voices, to collectivize and get together and support each other, that transcends geographical boundaries, as well as you're seeing in the women's game. And that wasn't the case. We thought by just being successful, that was enough to be the sort of thing that we could put to the club or the federation for more support. Well, we've just improved on last season's performance, or we've just got the Champions League on. And the natural expectation is, of course, we're going to get more resource. Of course, they're going to pay us more than expenses. But that didn't necessarily come, and I think, for that reason, now in retrospect, you kind of feel like I think we were powerless in that regard. We didn't really understand the channels that we could utilize to drive that change and really feel that we would be listened to.
I think that is quite common. For sort of an age demographic, and I'm not sure if that would also be more true of women, is that, that conversation about purpose, I think, often does come as a realization through growth and through career change, and isn't formed 17, 18, 19, 20. But it was interesting, you did describe arriving at Arsenal and recognizing the pioneers and wanting to be a part of that. And I think that's possibly some of the language that we use more intuitively about something that we then come to realize is a purpose driver later, but we don't recognize it in that moment. We focus on doing a good job and being part of something, and I wonder if that is a sort of a code for purpose as we would now describe it.
Yeah, definitely. I think purpose encapsulates so many things. My purpose became more driven when I realized, okay, I'm one of the few that represent, first generation Ghanaian Brits from my area. And actually all the guys that I played with, some of them I felt were good enough to play League One, Championship, and maybe Premier League, but didn't have the same window of opportunity as me. Suddenly my drive is to be more visible, is suddenly to try and be a voice for those who don't have the same kind of door that they can walk through or whatever. I feel like then it became more of a purpose for me in that regard. And when you talk about the pioneers, it's only much later, because of the history of the women's game hasn't been so well archived, compared to our peers, that we've kind of had a whole chunk of our history missing, and suddenly it's all being pieced together now for us. And we're like, oh my God, this game has existed for 50 plus years, and we're only just learning about the challenges of women of various generations have had to face. My first visible role model as a coach was my England manager, Hope Powell. And she was the first Black female England manager. And there hasn't been one in the elite level that I can think of since. So then it was really important for me then to feel like I should go into this space a little bit more and try to be that visible person in coaching as well. Little things like you're training maybe at 8 or 9 o'clock with the floodlights on, and they're getting switched off halfway through your session. So that's a battle. And then we got to make sure that doesn't happen next time. It was just madness, but those were the battles we were fighting. Was just for the basic things so that we could try to perform at our best. Because ultimately, when you play at the elite levels, Ash, you will face teams like the USA. You will face teams like Germany, who are much further ahead at that time in terms of their professionalism, in terms of the infrastructure around the team to be successful. And we were just expected to go and be successful, go and play, go and win, go and do something. Without all of those things, which when in retrospect, I look back and I think what we did at Arsenal, you think, wow, we did that, at a time when no one was looking and with the resource and all that wasn't there. But that's just testament to the character, I think, of all the women. And our manager, Vic, as well, I got to give him credit. He was the kit man for the men's team and he loved the club through and through. He watched Arsene Wenger. He watched the men train. He took on, things that they were doing and trying to incorporate to what we were doing. But I always felt great at the club. I always felt that it was very, everybody was so respectful. Everybody was so welcoming, despite obviously the massive disparities in finances and all those things.
How do you feel now about the sort of proportion of male and female coaches in the game? I appreciate you're now trailblazing again, aren't you? And I always have a little cringe when I hear stories of actually my daughter Daisy plays football, and I went the other day, there was probably 20 games going on, and 10 games going on, and about 20 coaches, and eventually I looked hard enough, I found one sort of female coach amongst them. I was thinking, this doesn't sit right. Like, it's great that she's got this opportunity to play and she loves to play, but actually the coaching demographic doesn't look as I'd expect it to.
It's a multi-layered and complex issue, actually, when it comes to coaching, because when you think about, I feel very fortunate I've been able to retire, transition out the game, go into coaching, go into a really good coaching environment, work with a head coach that was a female coach. Our assistant was also female, and we had a good sort of balance of male to female staff. But the game has only been professional for X amount of time at the elite level within the UK itself. So when you're talking about the kind of pathway of coaches coming through, it's challenging for them, because where can they go and work? What coaching environment is going to provide them a full-time job that they can commit to without, worrying about how they're going to pay their bills and things like that? I think, that just goes into the gender pay gap in general. I think more males coach because more males are in other, maybe even if they're not full-time coaches as a profession, they are in jobs that perhaps pay them more and allow them the time, therefore, to then give extra hours to coaching. Whereas women, obviously, have to, deal with that pay gap that they might have in their own jobs, whilst trying to commit hours to delivering for just their badges, to therefore go on to coaching, and obviously all the other things of family, which are challenges for both men and women to juggle. So it's kind of multi-layered in that respect. I think there are quite a good number of female coaches coming through now, and you'll see them at grassroots level, because football is driven fundamentally from the bottom, as far as I'm concerned, by communities and people within those communities. But that is, for me, that's the challenge. I think the game there's not been the kind of economy in it long enough to get that kind of pipeline of tons of female coaches in the game.
From a leadership perspective, we can all sort of picture as athletes in our heads the periods of our careers, or I can anyway, in terms of being that younger player, and you grow into sort of that leadership role with your experience, giving advice to younger players. I haven't transitioned into any form of coaching. What's that next step like again? You're part of the team in a different way. Is the leadership style different? How much you're involved with the team, on and off the pitch? Is the relationships a lot different, or different to manage in that? Just to get a sense of what that transition was like. Was it smooth? Did you have any shocks along the way?
I suppose it was quite smooth for me, but did I have shocks? Absolutely, because the easiest thing I thought that I could ever do was play football. That was the thing I was skilled at. That's the thing I loved. That's the thing I knew. And so coaching, again, was taking me into a new kind of unknown, and in terms of now I'm the teacher, and these are my students, and will I have the competencies to communicate in a way that I can motivate, engage everybody, that they understand what I'm delivering, all those things. Those are all insecurities that live within yourself as individuals. And I had those, apprehensions, because I'm like, some of these players were my teammates. They were in my locker room, last summer as the youngest players in the team. And now I'm here and I'm going to be delivering a session to you. That can be quite intimidating. It's like stepping on a stage in front of your audience. So of course I had all those feelings, but I spent so much time prepping, my sessions, and overlooking things and checking over again. And that's what I mean by the shocking factor, because I didn't realize the amount of time and commitment that goes into it, the detail that goes into every aspect of managing 23 players plus staff plus operations within the club, to make sure that everything just works and everybody is where they need to be. It was about making me into a mature human being that can make smart decisions for myself in life, not just on and off the pitch.
Yeah, awesome. Any comments on that, guys? Questions?
I just think it's such an inspirational journey. I'm just sort of processing that through. I'm still quite taken by that sort of football court being your playground and competing against those boys, and then suddenly having a new thing to go out with, the Arsenal women's piece, and then like that stepping into not just being a woman coach but a black woman coach, and so again trying to break ground for others as well. And I think it's quite humbling I think often it's been great being in those conversations where you sort of realise from a personal point of view how much sort of privilege I get to not have to think about those sort of things, and that sort of journey then into the difference in your that step into leadership, where I know if you've been a player, it feels like if things are sort of done for you, aren't they? You sort of turn up and the cones are laid out and the thing happens, and you're quite critical if it doesn't work, and all of a sudden you're the person. You're the person who had to make all those choices. So it's very inspirational to hear that journey, and I'm sure you're going to carry on breaking new ground as well, which is very exciting from my point of view.
I had a coach that I felt was head coach in Lauren Smith, who is very people centric, holistic, is very holistic about her approach to the game, to performance, to the individuals we have. And I felt like that sits within my values, as I was as a player, but as I want to be as a coach. I want to be approachable. I don't want people to feel like because you're a leader, somehow you know it all, because you don't. I've had sessions that I'm like, this should work. This is so simple. Why isn't it working? And I have to go back and go, well, okay, that wasn't a success, but I'm going to review it. I'm going to tweak it. Or maybe it's just not the right session for this group. So you have to be able to sort of leave your ego at the door as well, and always remember why you're here. And I always come back to, I prioritize the players. I'm here to make them better on the pitch, but also as people, because I grew and developed so much as a person, as a player through my playing career. It made me the sort of woman I am today. And it wasn't just about performance. I played in a generation of extreme diversity, in my opinion. My team was very diverse, from the youth team. So I progressed to the senior team, even the England team. But now I would say the elite level of the game is missing a core, for whatever reason, the pathway is not facilitating that players from across the intersections are coming through to the elite level, because England is not representative at the moment of what I think, society, a multicultural society looks like today.
Do you have an insight into why that is? I recognise that to be true. Yeah. What do you think's driving that?
Well, I think it's there's so many strands to why as well, and this is not necessarily, this is not a criticism of England or the FA. I think they've always strategically placed themselves in a way to be building and to be better and to make a successful national team and a successful domestic league, which they're tick, they're doing, right? And the marketing and all the stakeholders are fully invested and involved, and that's great. But what we've missed is the fundamental understanding of where the game innately grew from in the first place. And with that professionalism and with that money, accessibility has sort of diminished. Okay, so, when I lived in a suburb of London, I'd go into the city to train in Islington. The training was all in sort of London, and you could get train, bus, maybe guardians if you didn't have a parent available, or anyone, friends group that you could travel into. Now, a lot of the training grounds are in leafy areas outside of London. Literally maybe one bus passes there every 5 hours or something. There's no trains that run out in Hertfordshire or Cobham in South London. And women's or girls' football is not prioritized necessarily in scheduling. So there's still the last teams to maybe be training at 8 or 9 o'clock. So you can't expect young girls at 12, even younger, to be traveling in the late hours of to these facilities by themselves, unless they really need to have that support system or that support network to facilitate that. So that's one thing. But then socioeconomics then plays into that, because then you need the money, or the money, the disposable cash perhaps, to support those young people to get to train and to have the basic equipment, shoes, boots, whatever it is that stops them also, if they can get there, going. So it's multifaceted, I think, but it's identifying those problems and how the game can try to support it better. Because a lot of academies, for example, they'll have shuttle buses that will pick them up, drop them off to the school or education or to the training ground. The women's game, infrastructure-wise, isn't quite there yet, in my opinion.
I think that's so interesting, isn't it? Almost the success of the rise of the game is leading to some of these potential challenges. When you think about, things like, for example, now I have friends with younger daughters who want shirts for WSL players, and the price increases that they've seen in the last season, going from sort of a £75 youth shirt to £120 for the same team's youth shirt this year. That's because of success, but it's driving out fan base that now can't participate, and that's a really interesting balancing act, isn't it? That needs looking at, as you mentioned.
Yeah, and it's the monopoly effect, isn't it? Because the stakeholders are party to the economy of the game, and they're driving that, as you say, prices, but it's pricing out people and their kids essentially from accessing the game. And that's my worry, is that we start moving towards that kind of model, and then you leave lots of people behind. But, you know, I've said to Ash before, I've been a player for 20 odd years, and even backroom staff, you know, in the 20 odd years that I've played, haven't been very diverse. And that doesn't have to be from an on pitch perspective, but from physios to doctors to, you know, masseurs, like whatever, you know, we have to understand, why are we not able to get people in the door as well? And are we just sort of, which we all do as human beings, you naturally network with people you know or you trust, but can you sort of break that cycle and go, but, you know, actually, let's bring someone else who might see this from a different perspective and understand maybe the challenges more than I do about the individuals in the community that can't get here as well. And there's so many foundations out there doing great work. So sometimes it's more about collaborating too, and you'll start to see the best of those people come into the business, which it is at the end of the day.
Yeah, I directly relate. You spoke earlier about your role models and the impact that having a black coach turning up with her dreads from the same sort of community as you, the impact that has, and it sort of resonated with me, because I didn't care about rugby until I saw a black player playing on the wing that I could say, wow, he's the first, well, one of very, very few Welsh black players playing for Wales. I can go and do it as well. Maybe it can be for me. It is for me. Let's go. Let's get it done. And, you know, it just goes to show, I always question, you know, that balance between performance emphasis and, you know, it's visible in sport because it's always all over the media. It's very visible. Like you saw, I think there was a headline the other day about the Lionesses, you know, being the least diverse as being in ages. And it's just getting that balance of wondering how much they're committing to actually being diverse. And you'd say it's not just the players, it's backroom staff. And I was actually having a conversation the other day about, it was with someone from the WIU, about match officials.
Yeah.
And, you know, racial abuse, whether it's homophobia, you know, looking at it from a intersectional lens, you know, it is very much the same, you know, throughout sport, whether it's the Lionesses or the WIU in rugby. Yeah. I don't know any black physios, S&C, match officials. And, you know, those, you know, you and I both know the importance that those role models have on whole communities and demographics for people to enter the game and keep flooding the game. And until that commitment to that diversity and inclusion is more balanced with the performance side of things, you know, how much is progress really, really going to be made so that everybody feels like they truly belong? Is there a difference, you know, having that influence or trying to have that influence from a coaching perspective rather than being vocal from a playing perspective? Is it, you know, in terms of that power dynamic from a squad standing, if that makes sense? Is there a different feel to that, or is it still similar? Do you still feel the same sort of pressures?
No, I think the pressures are the same, but it is different in terms of, I think players almost need to recognize their power more in general. And you have natural personalities and characters that do speak up on issues and utilize their voice, but collectively they are very strong. And if they recognize, you know, kind of their power in utilizing their voice, the pressures of that is, like you're saying, how people perceive you when you walk in the room. Oh, here they go again. Are they ranting about X, Y, Z? Or those things can affect individuals and obviously how they perform. If the values aren't aligned and the whole group do not believe in the message that you're trying to send and the impact you're trying to have. From a coach, you kind of have to look at it from a different lens, because once you start to understand the intricacies of the business itself and the pyramid within that lives within that, then you kind of navigate, okay, well, actually, how can I have impact from this side of the table? And who are the people that I need to identify that are going to help me in this project towards progress? You know, but that's why the business as a whole, everybody needs to fundamentally be aligned in their values, from the owners to, do you know what I mean, the catering staff, to whoever it is. If your values are all aligned, that's when you start to see real change, because it all comes from, actually, if I do get a seat at the table, am I being heard? You know, do they listen? I might not always get the answer I want. That change may not be immediate, but are they genuinely listening? And am I being able to go, okay, in 3 years from now, can we revisit this? Or are you committed to this? And then you see that through action. But the pressures are the same, because if you are the only one challenging all the time and you don't have the allies in the room or whatever, then that can be taxing, right? It can be taxing emotionally, to be that one who's trying to make the difference every time.
I found this really, this just going back to something you were saying there, Ashton. I know when you and I first worked together, it was the first time that there's something about sport, isn't there, that sort of group that come together that is sort of quite built on that sort of change in fun, and that is quite instinctive. So you tend to say the thing that's in your head when you see a person do something you think's funny and so on. And I guess therefore it leaks by actually really quickly. And I think the thing that really, I suppose, was my first big sort of talking to you, Ashton, about something that might seem funny versus something that's, you know, genuinely stoking an unhelpful narrative, and actually realizing that I'm not sure I can always see that as clearly. And I think your point about sort of allyship, and I think, you know, I don't know, you pushed me on it a couple of times, Ashton. I think we kind of know what's right and wrong, so we know when it is or when it isn't, and it's sort of being able to trust ourselves to do that. And somehow it's that sort of balance.
Talk over stuff that we've been working on. So massively appreciative of your time. I can't thank you enough. Hearing your story, your success has been amazing. And I can't wait to see what's next for you, because you're breaking records and promotions and whatnot at the rate of knots, man. So yeah, massive thank you from me, Neats, and I'll shout you soon.
No, it's a pleasure, and it's great to meet you all, and good luck with everything. So thanks for today.
Thank you. Thanks, Anita.
All right. Take care.
Thanks, Neats.
See you soon, Ash.
Take care. Bye.
Bye.
I think for me, one of the really interesting thoughts that I just think whenever we end up in these conversations, even with yourself, Ashton, I think the thing, and Patrick, you nodded to it, that I've become very humble about is the weight of responsibility that we will have never had to experience in our leadership journey for role modelling to that degree, and with that level of needing to kind of support and endorse a community or a demographic or whatever it might be, and feel like a visible representation of a weight and body of people sits with an individual when you are going on a learning leadership journey yourself. What a weight that must be at any age.
Yeah, it's very humbling. I felt the same. Like you say, that's sort of just that you just don't know what you don't know if you've not had that sort of experience. But yeah, to, you know, imagine anybody, you know, finding their way to the top of their sport, you know, being able to perform at that level, do all of those things is hard enough in itself. To start, you know, with the sort of potential restrictive factors, with not having a role model to see, and then feeling that weight, as you say, Em, of actually not just doing this for you but for others as well. It's very humbling to sort of work that through.
Yeah, and I touched on it during the conversation, is having those battles. Everybody faces their battles, but having all of those battles, and I spoke about it, you know, looking at intersectionality and the number of things that can affect, you know, the way you treated, the rate of your progress, the impact that it has on your goals and ambitions, you know, the number of barriers to jump to then still achieve is hugely impressive. Is my main takeaway. You know, the amount they had to fight and still fight now, in terms of when she first broke into the England squad with Arsenal, you know, getting the women's game recognition, being a role model herself for a community, all of the things that you guys have touched on is massive for me.
Yeah, I think the other one that really resonated for me, was got me thinking from that, you know, we're always keen to learn sport business, just that thought process that actually we've become less diverse as we become commercially. Like I sort of knew that, but I don't think I'd really thought about it. And I think Neat's obviously got a really, you know, great point of view on why that's happening and those things. And I don't know, I just think it's probably think about our own journey in leading edge performance. That sort of, you know, as you're growing and you're evolving and you got to grow quickly, and you know, you're trying to get the best possible, you know, team coaches, and you're going out recruiting on what you think that is, and you know, like, you suddenly wake up one morning and go, hang on a second, like, you know, maybe we're racing to fight to create a sort of something that's commercially viable, but you know, there's other factors in this too that, you know, that now we've sort of drifted along with, that we've like unintentionally got to a place of going, well, actually this isn't the plan, but this is, you know, an unintended consequence of what we're doing. And actually, how do you pause and sort of redress that? Because you know, I'm sure England would say they just want the best athletes from around, you know, from any demographic. I'm sure that would be a starting place, but commercially, if that starts to drive to say there's some things that we're doing here which are making that less accessible to a whole community of people, if we haven't sort of copped hold of that and gone, that's not going to end well, and that's not the right thing to do, and we have to find a better way. That's that's just really interesting. I just wonder how many other walks of life that's the same, you know, that happens the same in.
I think that it's not just about the unintended consequences in the creation of that, it's what it gives you as an unintended consequence as well, isn't it? Because you know, what does that mean for your diversity of thought, for your creativity, for your innovation, for your, you know, difference of voices? You know, we've talked often about echo chambers and stuff. You know, there's a reality of what you've built becomes your seen and known truth. You know, and where is the fresh thinking? And that creativity coming from? We're missing a whole opportunity to engage different thoughts, I guess.
Definitely. And if we looked at leading edge performances sort of journey and where it started to where we're at now, reflecting on that, what would you say the key points are, if we were to point out some key points, you know, in this period of time? It may have started before our relationship, you know, during. What do you think the key points are? What is it that has led to this point, you know, doing this roundtable discussion, covering some of the topics that we have, focusing on things that you might not have focused on in the past?
I think, I mean, you used a term already, in terms of an echo chamber, and I think what I think, you know, I don't know, it was just a series of experiences, and certainly, you know, you were a part of that, Ashton, of just suddenly clicking that there's a whole sort of I don't know, blind spot, I suppose, I have in terms of, you know, things that are going on in the world that I'm just not really very tuned into, and I'm perhaps in a rush to do the things I want to do, and you know, sort of that, it's not that you're not interested, it's just sort of almost not on your radar. And then I think when you do make a conscious effort to say, well, actually that's something that can change and do something about, I think the first thing you do find, or I've been finding, is just that you notice more, you know. So I think, you know, when you and I first spoke, Ashton, it was sort of probably a bit caught in my old, we're in this circle, but I don't know why we are. And then, you know, a very high recollection of you pointing out some, inconvenient truths to us about perhaps the way that we might organise an event or the manner in which we might talk, then you go, actually, you're completely right. Like, we're not gonna, we think that we're inviting a diverse and inclusive group to join us in a location that everybody's going to want to be in, and actually, if you look that through a different pair of eyes, you go, actually, I can see why that wouldn't be the case. And you know that your intent isn't wrong in it, but that doesn't make it right either. So I think the first thing that I would say, I feel like we're very early on this journey, but I think the thing that I'm enjoying in it is the sort of higher radar, the more often feeling a bit humbled by the fact that I've just realised something isn't sort of quite right there, or I've got to do something different. I'm more and more intrigued by allyship, and I don't know whether I'm quite got there yet, but I think certainly, spending some time with the Roses, it's been really helpful again to be in an environment that I feel less comfortable in, and then to sort of champion things that I feel are really important to champion and try and understand more. I think when I meet people, I think I feel more comfortable now to sort of try and understand their journey and their hardships and actually ask those questions, and I suppose be able to create a degree of empathy for that. So I think that is is our starting place. That's sort of where I would say.
It's awareness, isn't it? Awareness to other things going on that don't immediately affect you.
Yeah, and facing into it, Ash, as well, and just saying, actually, that's sort of not okay to carry on and not do something different, and even if that's a little bit scary and you can't see actually how I'm going to change that, maybe in a time frame that I'd want to, or like at least making a step in the right direction and doing, taking another step every day, I think is a really important thing.
I think I'm probably representative of how a lot of people possibly feel in this space. There we go. I'm going to wheel over it now and kind of go. Yeah. We all feel like this, but let's go with that. I think there's a fearfulness of getting it wrong that I think is present. Certainly for me, I worry more about misstepping, misspeaking, misquestioning, misassuming, all sorts of stuff that mean it's not easier to do now. Well, it's clearly easier to do nothing. It doesn't come from a place of bad intent. It just comes from perhaps a rhetoric or narrative of fearfulness that I think exists in certainly in a lot of social media, and mainstream media around the risk of getting it wrong, and the upset you can cause by overstating or over questioning or anything. So I do think there is that intent-based piece, which I think Ashton has brought us to, and you can get it wrong once, but not more than once, and the provocation about being, I guess, inquisitive and more knowledgeable, and my homework that Ashton sets in terms of reading lists and all that kind of stuff. I think that is steps in the right direction that you probably wouldn't recognise overtly, but is a journey of, I think, start with self, and I definitely think I'm there in terms of, I'm not going at leading edge performers, we should do this. I'm going, actually, what do I need to do and know and be differently first, and then how do we bring that into how we lead this business?